Hello there, my lovelies. Welcome to another episode of Sitting Down with Soul Writer with me, Jenna O'Malley, your soul writer, author of sci-fi, fantasy with dashes of romance and nerdy references. Today, we're going to talk about the other career I've dedicated my life to, teaching. I am also going to, in many ways, reflect on the current state of the education system for K-12 schools in the U.S. So please leave any prejudices and biases you have, for better or for worse, at the door of this conversation, or turn around and go down the hall to the next classroom if you get that analogy a little bit. If you are also not a K-12 teacher, you might have a hard time swallowing some of what I have to say, but keep in mind, I am trying to look at this from all sides of the coin, from everybody involved. Thank you very much for your patience and for understanding. Please take the time to like, sub, check the bell, and leave a comment if anything resonates with you in some way. I want to know why and would love to have a conversation. This is in no way meant to start a debate or an argument. Trust me, teachers are tired of this debate and argument and need to be listened to. Most importantly, and especially to my fellow teachers, their students, and the families whom they serve and the communities that they touch, please take care of yourself at the beginning of this school year. I know you're all worth it. Now, class, let's begin. Welcome back, my lovelies. Things I know my fellow teachers are going through right now, and I see what you're going through right now, make this time of year really stressful for all of us involved. I'm doing many of the same tasks you are in a brick and mortar setting as a virtual teacher still. I know what your stressors are looking like. You're spending time by the pool and whatnot, making syllabi, lesson plans, making purchases for your classroom that's really wrongfully coming out of your pocket and your salary, even though you are also taxed like everybody else is in the US. At the same time, parents are rightfully upset, and some of them are wondering, how the heck am I going to be able to afford this school year? I get it. I grew up in poverty. There were times where literally my parents had to choose between either feeding us more PB&J sandwiches or giving me the money to go and put a project together. That was in the 1990s, mind you. We didn't have the guidelines that we have today saying what parents do and don't have to pay for. A lot of parents are like, shut up, Jenna. I pay for my kids' stuff. A lot of parents, can't. Mine barely could. I will say, though, if you can afford to buy your kid name brand shoes without going to a secondhand store, or apply that to getting them a brand new cell phone as soon as it comes out, or a console or a video game as soon as it comes out, you should be paying for at least your child's pens, pencils, and paper, if nothing else. Just saying. If you can afford to buy the things that allow your child to look good among their group of friends, you should also be paying at least for the basic school supplies. Many of you parents do, and thank you so much to those of you who, even though you struggle to pay the bills, find a way to do something to at least get the basics covered. Under free and appropriate public education guidelines, if your kid attends a public school, some states translate that to mean, from the legalese inside the documents, that you as a parent don't have to pay anything. Now, yes, you're taxed. I already mentioned that's, taxes is where education's supposed to be funded from. Most schools only are able to give teachers maybe $100 a year to run a classroom. That's a lot of pens and pencils and paper, right? When you go to Walmart or the Dollar Tree or whatever store is near you. True, but when I taught in a brick and mortar school in West Virginia, I was buying pens, paper, and highlighters, and that was it. That's all I could manage to afford. At one of those two schools, teachers were also required to supply not only their own printer in the classroom. If they wanted one, they had to buy it themselves. Yes, we got to keep it when we left the school, but we also had to buy the ink for it, The paper for it, that's okay. I don't mind. It's my printer. I'll buy the special stuff I want for it. The problem I had though was if I took anything to the copier machine up in the teacher's lounge, I also had to pay for my own paper. The school covered the machine, the maintenance for the machine, and a limited amount of ink. And once the ink was gone, it was gone. ELA, English Language Arts, is also the first subject to get their textbook budgets cut so it can be reassigned to math or science, because math or science are only given the same amount of money a year, 100, maybe $200. Can you imagine replacing calculators and your budget for the year is maybe $100 from your school, from the tax money that you as an employee and your fellow parents, teachers, and so on in the community are paying in? You can't even buy new calculators. You can't buy non-reusable lab equipment stuff. You know, those litmus test papers and things that kids need to do basic science labs? We're talking basic stuff that can zap a $200 budget and maybe cover one lab. Now imagine running honors courses off of that budget. Still is that way today, as far as I'm aware, in most schools in West Virginia. And where I live, in one of the poorest counties in Maryland, it's the same way. If it aren't for business partnerships, parents giving above and beyond what they should or can or want to, most classrooms are boring, ugly looking, and very non-interactive for students, because all that high-end 21st century engagement interaction is expensive, especially since so many of the materials for the projects in any class we're enticed to teach our students, virtual or not, costs money for supplies. Now you're like, wait a minute, why are you complaining? You teach in a virtual school where my students are not allowed to turn stuff in physically unless they take a picture of it, right? So a lot of my students still like to do stuff by hand, but their parents don't want to supply what they could have gotten at a brick and mortar school for free. So my students are kind of struggling. You know, if I have to do a lab for my science class with common kitchen stuff, making volcanoes and with vinegar and baking soda kind of stuff, they can't, because mom and dad can't even afford to put that on the grocery bill, or they just don't have it in the house for whatever reason. So some of my students are still saying, I can't attend a virtual school because there's no money in it. Most of my kids are public school students that come to see me because they tore their MCL, ACL, whatever in their knee, and the surgery went wrong. That's a common one I see. I have another student who is recovering from a car wreck and has had multiple surgeries from it. You know, these are things that happen to our students. So they can't attend a public school, and we are partnered with public schools to allow them to, also raise their own kids. Some of my high school students are teen parents to their own biological kids, true, but I also have a couple of juniors and seniors who are legal guardians to a couple of my 8th graders, to their younger siblings, because mom and dad either passed away, unfortunately. You can imagine what caused that in the last couple years, or they work all the time, or their parents are in jail. I kid you not. These are common things that happen across every high school, every middle school, every elementary school in the US. But my students are fortunate that they have a free partnership virtual program to come to that isn't exactly entirely 100% free. Because if they need supplies, who supplies it? A lot of my students also are given school issued internet hotspot cards and school issued Chromebooks. Some of them appreciate it. And of course, like with most other systems, some teachers understand once you issue that Chromebook, you know it went home and got sold for drugs that night with some parents. Sadly, That's going to make some other parents in the chat listening mad. I know. How could a parent be that way? It happens more than you realize. And I'm quite sure that if you were to say this to your children, they probably could name someone they went to school with. Nay, I know I can name someone I graduated high school with that lived in that same situation, very same situation. So it's not pretty for all involved. Is there a right answer? Yeah, the government, if they're going to not require parents to pay for an education for their student, which I am 1000% for, 1000% for, the government also needs to therefore properly fund the education instead of divesting money from it into other things. It is a shame that when I was talking to other teachers about this, I get told things like, I work in a physical school and I was given $25 to fund my classroom because of cuts to budgets from needing PPE and needing gloves. I'm like, wait a minute, $25 to run your classroom's PPE program, hand sanitizer, whatever face coverings you are, because some states and areas are still using them, to be fair. Some are not, some are stepping in and out as needed. That costs money. And a lot of schools were just taking from the general budget to fund that. Yes, we got some money to help with that over the last couple of years. A lot of those funds are starting to dry up or just aren't covering it because, like where I worked at the beginning of my career, that is the only high school in the whole county, and it's one of the largest counties in the state of West Virginia. Has one high school serving probably 1,500 to 2,000 kids. That's a lot of kids on one campus for one county. And it's one of the poorest counties in the state. And this happens in other states, and I'm sure other people across the US who are teachers and or parents are going, yeah, this sounds super familiar. Therefore, it's also one of the poorest performing schools academically. And a certain thing that is going on with federal guidelines actually, in my opinion, makes it to where the better you perform, the better attention you get, but in the wrong ways. It shouldn't be a competition between schools with those rating cards affecting how you get budgeting, how your teachers get evaluated. Wait a minute. You mean I can bust my butt, but my kids can opt to basically walk out on a test at the end of the year, causing them to flunk it voluntarily, and I don't get my raise? Yes, I saw that happen to a fellow teacher in the last 10 years. Twice. So, should I be reinvesting, therefore, anywhere from $3 to $5,000 of my salary, which isn't that great, every year back into my classroom? No. I used to. When I first started and I found out I got $200 as a first year teacher to fund my whole classroom, my husband got very upset because he said, you spent thousands that we don't have on this classroom, and it's money we'll never see back. What other profession do you get away with that? Yes, nurses do have to buy some things on their own. Stethoscopes, stuff like that. They have to pay for their patients' tests out of their own pockets, though. I have to pay for my clients, my students, out of my own pocket sometimes. But people say, you took the job for the moral reward. Yeah, but it's not enough for many teachers to stay in. The fact that my husband and I hardly see each other, and I'm working 50 plus hours a week when it's supposed to be 40 hours a week, and I'm making less than $40,000 a year, I don't blame teachers for leaving. When I can't afford to buy a house after working in this profession for 10 years, regardless of what's going on the housing market, it's a problem. It's a problem. One that many healthcare and education professions knows. So, as the school year starts, please keep an open mind. Check your personal biases and prejudices at the door. And I'm not just talking to mom, dad, grandmom, guardian, whomever. I'm talking to the students and I'm talking to my fellow teachers. I'm calling you out just as hard because some of you need to leave my profession and you know who you are. Some of us are in it because we care. Yes. If you don't care, career change time. It is never too late. You are not too old. There's many people, management wise, in businesses right now who are paying teachers to leave their jobs to become managers, content creators, advisors. There's an exit strategy now that didn't exist 5 years ago when I was looking to leave at the 5 year burnout point. Consider what you can and can't do. Take a moment to reflect before ire, bias, and prejudice leaves your mouth. That's all I ask. Otherwise, have an awesome school year. I'm really looking forward to it. We shall see how things play out. And above all, like I was saying, please have an open mind. Take care of yourself. I know you're worth it. Bye.